Hello, good morning. Welcome to my channel and welcome to Devon in the southwest of England. I hope you're well wherever you are. So first I'm going to take you to a secluded little beach just round the corner here. Normally there's not many people here, but it is starting to get busier now. There are more and more tourists turning up, and as this is my first summer living in this part of the world, I'm not quite sure what to expect, so we will see. So standing here right now in this beautiful setting is really special for me, and that's because a decade ago I never imagined that I would ever be able to turn my life around and be living in such a wonderful place. And so I think back to that difficult time in my life in Germany where I really did hit rock bottom. And the first image that comes to mind is the image of my dark, dingy bedsit in the morning as I awoke and looked at those chalky antacid tablets at the side of my bed and remembered that I had woken up in the middle of the night with a jolt, desperately in need of the tablets after having come close to choking on my own vomit. And that sounds disgusting, doesn't it? But the lifestyle that I was leading made this a regular occurrence. And here comes a train. My manager and my stakeholders at work were concerned about me. I was no longer a safe pair of hands to take care of these large, complex projects and programs that I was running. And eventually I had to remove myself from these and take on work with much lower levels of responsibility. They were not very demanding. There was no sense of purpose for me, and I got no enjoyment from them, and I spent a lot of time on my own with not much to do. And so that added to my sense of loneliness. Fridays at work were the worst day. They're normally the best, of course, but they were the worst day of the week because they signaled the beginning of the weekend when I would be completely alone for the whole of those 2 days. In addition to this, my doctor was concerned about me because my blood pressure was increasing. There were issues with my potassium levels. I was putting on far too much weight. And it was obvious for anyone to see that I was becoming more and more unhealthy. Now I can trace this difficult period of my life back to two events. The first was moving abroad. The second was something that happened to us. Something that we had to report to the police, and something that dominated our life for several years after we discovered what had happened. Now I use the word us to mean our family. An attack on one person is an attack on all of us because we're a close family, and so it felt like we were all going through this very difficult period together. Now it's quite interesting because this thing that happened to us, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to expand on that too much because I find it rather difficult to talk about, but I have written about it and I will let you know when I finally publish my book so that you can read about it. But this thing that happened to us was both a source of great pain and anguish and stress and upset for us all, But in some strange way, it also gave me my greatest sense of purpose at that particular time in my life, because I felt I had a duty to help get my family through this. Because what followed, once we reported it to the police, was a lengthy investigation, a Crown Court case, and a lot of activities that spanned at least 4 years, and which, at least from an administrative perspective, were finally put to bed just a couple of weeks ago, actually, when we finally got some compensation for what we'd been through. And it was a small moment of celebration. Oops, hang on, I'm going to get wet here. The compensation is not going to significantly alter our lives, but it does at least give us a small sense of justice, and that was important to us. And so I am hoping that we can finally put that behind us and move on. Although, to be quite honest, I think we're going to be living with the consequences of this for the rest of our lives. But anyway, it was a small moment of celebration recently, and I talked about the fact that it gave me a sense of purpose, all of this. And I'll just give you a little bit of a flavour of it. You may have seen me in previous videos talking about my dislike of bureaucracy, and maybe that has its roots in this criminal investigation, because the complexity of our lives lived in 2 countries had spilled over into the police activities, the courtroom. The police officer said to us after the court case, she said, "I've never seen a court case like that before, where people from different countries join by video link." And that's what happened. And if you know the data privacy laws in Germany, then you'll know they're very strict, very stringent. And so I became the single point of contact for the UK police, trying to get all the relevant information from the German authorities released and provided, and sometimes translated to the UK authorities. And so not only was I feeling the need to provide emotional support to my family, I also felt the need to be the main coordinator of all activities. And then there was the fact that I was staying behind in Germany whilst my family was living in England. And that was because I felt the need to provide some stability during this really difficult period. And some people, including myself, might have asked, well, why didn't you go back to England and get a job there so that you could be close to your family? Well, the truth was, my mental health was in bad shape. For anyone who's applied for jobs that carry with them quite a lot of responsibility, like the one that I had in Germany, would know, you need to be on top of your game when you're applying for those kind of jobs, and for when you're taking on those jobs. So I didn't feel I had the right attitude at the time. I didn't feel I had the capability at the time to even get through the interview. But had I managed to somehow or other put on a brave face and get through the interview, I felt sure I wouldn't get through the trial period in the job. I always remember something that Viktor Frankl wrote, in his book Man's Search for Meaning, and in the book he wrote, if there's meaning in life at all, then there must be meaning in suffering. And I was certainly suffering during this period, and so perhaps that explains why I was able to find some meaning and use that to drive the change that was needed to get me and my family through that period. So now I've found a quieter spot where I can continue the story. Isn't this just beautiful here? Glorious English countryside. You can't ask for more than this, can you? So what was the very first steps, or what were the very first steps that I took in order to start rebuilding my life once I'd hit rock bottom? The first thing I needed to do was to address my lifestyle, and in particular drinking. Now that wasn't a decision I made quickly, because it probably took me a year or more, maybe even 2 years, I can't remember exactly, but it took me a long time to even admit that I had a problem. And so I think probably what the first step was to start listening to podcasts, actually. And I'd never previously done that. And I discovered a whole world of... Hold on, I'm just trying to figure out where I've got to go here now. I think it might be there, so I'll just talk to you before we go through the woods. So yeah, I discovered all these podcasts that gave me an amazing sense of strength and encouragement and optimism. And I mean, I can't remember all the names of these podcasts, but people like Tony Robbins, Tim Ferriss, James Altucher, Eric Zimmer, I think his name is, from the One You Feed podcast. And I used to listen to these podcasts all the time when I was out walking, when I was back in the flat on my own, when I was driving. These podcasts became a big part of my life. And that was because I was, I suppose, looking for company, but looking for inspiration, really. And they almost became like my best friends. And what's that saying? You are the average of the 5 people you spend most of your time with. Well, I was spending most of my time with these amazing people on these podcasts and the guests that they used to interview. And these episodes were quite lengthy, normally a minimum of 1 hour, and they would really go into detail about people's lives and people's experiences and the hardships they went through and how they overcame huge obstacles in their lives. And slowly but surely there was something in these people that started to rub off on me, and people started to notice this. It was as though I was slowly becoming a different person, and it also coincided with me deciding to start blogging. So I used to go off to places all over Germany, find a nice setting like I am here now. So I'd find a beautiful place, take some photographs and write about the place where I was visiting, but also about my thoughts and what I was going through in life. And these blog posts started to attract some attention. I began to feel part of a little community, and people even in my home city of Bonn began to notice. I can't remember which paper it was now, maybe the Bonn Anzeiger, I'm not sure. There was some local paper where they listed the local bloggers and my name was there. and so my colleague who was sat next to me knew about me and my blogging, and so I started blogging about work as well. And this started to create opportunities for me. So even though I was in a difficult position, I found myself running events, talking about my experiences, not my personal experiences, but my experiences at work, because but even by then I'd had a long career and worked on many international projects, worked in different countries, and I had something to say. And the wisdom that I'd picked up from some of these podcasters had found its way into my own way of thinking and my own mind, and it all sort of got mixed up and combined, and as I talked I found I had things to say that were of interest to my colleagues. And even though I was employed as a project manager, a senior project manager, I found myself doing something completely different, and I was doing things that my line manager hadn't asked me to do, but things which were being demanded of me by colleagues. So I became known for facilitating big workshops, for moderating big events, for blogging, and even later on doing podcasts and videos occasionally too, although not so many of those at work, but I still did some. And so I went from this desperate situation where I had no purpose whatsoever at work, or I felt like that, I was just not being trusted with anything big or significant. I went from that to being highly in demand, highly sought after, and at the leading edge of changes that were going on inside our organisation. What happened then was I was asked to organise and lead a very large event at work. So it was an unexpected opportunity. It came out of the blue, but it was something I was asked to do, and I accepted with some trepidation, with some reservations, but somehow or other I felt I had to say yes to it. So I said yes, and at the same time I said to myself, there's only one way I am going to deliver this successfully, and that is to stop drinking until the event is over. And that meant I had to give up drink for about 2 months, prepare, organise and run this event, and then on the evening, when it was all done, I treated myself to a few beers. And what I discovered as I started to go without alcohol was that it was really horrible to start with. I mean, it was terrible. I mean, I had nothing to look forward to in the evenings. I had nothing to look forward to at the weekends. Alcohol had become like my best friend, a toxic friend, but the only friend I had. So, as I was driving home every night, I really looked forward to that first glass of wine or that first cold beer. And it was just an integral part of my life. And to give up on that was really hard to... It was a really hard step to take. And what I discovered was that it continued to be hard, night after night after night. It was difficult. But I was enjoying waking up without a hangover. I was enjoying having good quality night's sleep. I was enjoying all the preparation for this big event that I was organising. And I was starting to feel like I'd found my mojo. I was starting to feel like I was moving in the right direction. And I was starting to appreciate the benefits of not drinking. And maybe after about 4 weeks, I got to a point where it was easier to have a night without a drink than it was to have a night with a drink. So the whole situation had shifted. I learned that it takes, I'm not sure exactly how long, but maybe 4 or 5 weeks to kick a bad habit. And I think that's what happened. I had kicked a bad habit, and I knew that even though I still was tempted to have a drink, I knew that having one would lead to me needing those chalky antacid tablets in the middle of the night and waking up late for work and letting my colleagues down and all of the negativity that went with it. So, ran the event. It was a fantastic event, absolutely loved it, got really positive feedback, and then I started drinking again. And a pattern started to emerge with my drinking. I would drink, and the first night I would drink quite sensibly. The second night it started to get a bit more serious, and then by the third night I was drinking a lot. And then by about the 6th or 7th night I'd had enough of it and I gave up again. And so I started to get into this cycle of stopping drinking for a week, starting again, it getting out of hand, stopping again. And so it was a strange cycle, but at least I was now aware that it was a problem, and I was regularly having a break from the alcohol. Then, fast forward a few years, we got to the pandemic, to the COVID pandemic. And I thought to myself two things. I thought, if I stay in this flat drinking, I'll probably drink myself to death. And that's no way to live my life. I don't want this. And I thought, I need to do everything possible to strengthen my immune system so that if I do get COVID, I can fight it. So I made the decision to give up drink during lockdown. And by that stage, my wife had returned to Germany and was living with me, and she didn't drink either, so that helped too. So neither of us were drinking. And that was wonderful. The pandemic wasn't wonderful, but the abstinence from alcohol for a year was just fantastic. And since then, my relationship with alcohol has changed significantly. I hardly drink at all. If I do drink, it's normally just when I'm out and having a drink just so I can relax with friends. But that's rarely. I don't go out too often, so that might be once every couple of months. And just occasionally I'll have a drink at home. Perhaps I'm feeling stressed or depressed or something, and I'll just have a couple of beers, but I always regret it, don't enjoy it, and then I stop again. So alcohol is no longer a significant part of my life. So that's it. That was the first thing, and I think I need to go back now because I've kind of gone off at a bit of a tangent, but that was the second step, I think. So the first step was surrounding myself with people whose attitude and approach to life was a healthy one, and that rubbed off on me, and that was through listening to podcasts. The second step was to take advantage of the opportunities that came from that new way of thinking. And the third step, which was probably in parallel to the second step, was to completely change my relationship with alcohol. And then, probably in parallel to some of those steps, was I started running. So for the first time in my life since leaving school, I began running. And I think that was actually the result of a podcast. There was a fella in his 60s who used to go running and talk about the benefits of it, and used to organise running events, and I used to listen to him, and he kind of made me think to myself, well, anyone can do this. You know, there are, if these people who are older than me can take up running, then I can do it. And my colleagues at work did a lot of running, and we even had a running club. It was called Fit Durch den Winter. So it was to encourage people to keep fit through the winter months, and they had different groups who were at different levels in terms of their fitness. And I joined the group that was called the Windhundgruppe, so the greyhound group. So it was named with a sense of sarcasm, I think, because it was for the slowest runners. So I joined this group, and we would go out and run along the Rhine, and it would start by running for 2 minutes and then walk for a minute and then run for another 2 minutes and then walk for 2 minutes. And it was this kind of gradual build up of our fitness until we were able in the spring to run a 10k. So I did this, and I ran a couple of events with my colleagues, and that gave me some closer friendships. It gave me some wonderful moments of celebration, but it really helped my mental health. The running was fantastic. Even when I was lonely and depressed, I went out for a run and I came back feeling so much better. And in terms of my creativity, all my good ideas came whilst I was out running, or most of my good ideas. So if I was organising or running an event at work, the ideas for that came when I was running. When I was writing my book, the ideas for that came when I was running. When I was doing my blogging, whatever I did creatively, the ideas often came to me as I was jogging along the banks of the Rhine. So as you can see, I started off with some small steps, but it sort of snowballed, and it became this whole new lifestyle with lots of different strands that were all taking me in a positive direction. And I've never looked back, really. There you go. What do you think? River, brook, stream? The signpost says river walk. It looks very small for a river, but maybe that's what it is, a little river. So here I am back down at the sea after a long hike. I'm feeling good for that. Anyway, so how do I sum up what we've just been talking about, or what I've just been talking about? One question I often ask myself is, did I need to wait this long? So if you think that from that real low point in my life, it probably took me 10 years to get to this place that is probably as close to heaven as I'm ever going to get. So did I need to wait 10 years? Well, first of all, I didn't wait 10 years, because what I came to appreciate is that you shouldn't mortgage your happiness. So you shouldn't say I will be happy when I finish work, or I will be happy when I have enough money to buy that car. Because when that moment arrives, it can sometimes be a disappointment, but also you can waste a lot of years waiting for that moment. So what I did was, after I pulled myself together, I enjoyed many of my years in Germany, both the years when I was on my own, but in particular the years when my wife came out to join me. And so I would say I had a good end to my career and a good end to my time in Germany. We didn't waste a single moment. We used to go off all over Europe hiking and having holidays. Every weekend we were somewhere beautiful, somewhere special, and we were making the most out of every minute. And what I learned was that when you're in a difficult situation like that, you might not be able to change your external surroundings immediately. It might take a long time, as it did me. It took me 10 years to change my external surroundings and my overall situation. But what I could do very quickly was start to change myself, start to take small steps to improve my own attitude, my own mindset, my own mental and physical health, so that I was able to create some meaningful moments within the current situation. And that put me in a position to prepare myself for future possibilities. So I think change starts from within, and I've talked about the things that I did to do that. A lot of these podcast hosts talked about agency, and I hadn't really heard of that word before, but they meant that we're all able to take control of our lives and to steer our lives in a certain direction. And I never really believed that to start with. But through these small steps that I started to take, like starting to do running, like starting to do blogging, I realised that I might not be able to control the whole of my life and the whole world, but I can control certain aspects of it. And I can take myself on a journey of improvement and self-development and self-actualization. And I was listening to a podcast the other day, actually. It's a podcast hosted by Davina McCall, and she was interviewing someone called Robin Sharma. I'd not come across him before, but he was quite an inspirational character. And he talked about change, and he said there are 3 stages in change: hard at the start, messy in the middle, and glorious at the end. That is what I've been through, and that is what I think you have to go through when you're making these changes in your life. You have to accept that it's not going to be easy. We're always looking for easy things in life, or at least I am. I'm always looking for easy options, for an easy life. There's something in my psyche that says I should be sitting on a beach, reading a book, relaxing. I see lots of people here doing that now. And I would like to avoid any kind of confrontation or hardship or risk. But actually, if you think about all the best things in your life, or at least if I think about all the best things in my life, they've all been hard. Finding a partner, having children, moving country, learning a language, making career changes. Let me just think about that one example, finding a partner. So I really struggled with relationships when I was younger. And I met my wife, and I was very excited and felt sure she could be the one for me. But I was terrified of taking that first step, of initiating a move and of showing some interest. But it all started with a first step, and that step was really hard. And this shows how old I am, but the first step was to pick up the phone and dial her number. The second step was to say hello, and the third and hardest step was to say something like, "Do you fancy meeting up for lunch?" And so even though I was terrified of the overall thing, it wasn't like I was needing to jump straight in and get married on that day. All I needed to do was to pick up the phone. That's not to say it was easy, it was hard. And it became a bit messy, of course, as I dealt with my nervousness of going on the first date and, entering into a relationship and announcing it to family and friends. But in the end came something glorious, which was a very happy marriage. And so perhaps we all have to go through these stages to reach something that is worth achieving. And maybe life isn't meant to be easy. Maybe life is meant to be a series of challenges that are difficult, because it's in those difficulties that we start to learn and grow and find out who we really are. Anyway, I think I have talked enough, and I hope some of this resonated with you. I hope some of it made sense. I still can't believe that I'm making these videos and talking about some of these things that are quite personal, aren't they, really? But but maybe this is also another example of something I'm doing that has been hard, that has been messy, but that is teaching me some new skills and perhaps helping me to find some purpose during this period of my life when I am no longer working. So thanks ever so much for watching, for subscribing and for liking, if you do subscribe and like. But thanks very much for joining me. I hope you're well wherever you are. So I'll leave it there. Take care of yourselves, and I'll talk again soon. Thanks then. Bye.